Are you looking to put your products in front of millions of customers? Then Walmart Marketplace is for you. With more than 120 million unique monthly visitors according to Comscore, Walmart Marketplace is one of the fastest growing e-commerce platforms. Join today and gain instant access to millions of customers from one of the world's largest retailers. Go to marketplace.walmart.com. That's marketplace.walmart.com. Welcome to Ecommerce Conversations, a weekly podcast from Practical E-commerce, hosted by entrepreneur Eric Bandholz.
What is going on, Internet? Eric Bandholz back again with another E-commerce Conversations. Hope all is going well on the other side of the Internet. On the other side of the Internet, from me, Jacob. Welcome.
What's up? Nice to meet you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I've enjoyed your Twitter post and some of the I don't know, like I want to call it drama, but just like good internet ribbing is probably what I would describe it as going on. But why don't you give our listeners a real quick rundown of who the hell you are and what the heck you do?
Sure. Well, my name is Jacob. I'm a software engineer. I'm a data scientist. And I spend most of my time working on AI in e-commerce right now. So I work for Common Thread Collective, the growth agency, and I'm spending most of my time integrating AI into the creative process right now. So the little drama that you mentioned was mostly because of some image generation stuff, which I've been having fun with posting around. But yeah, ultimately the work goes across the entire system and the entire creative operating system.
So Taylor Holiday has been on the podcast. For those listeners, you can search for that. Brilliant guy. CTC is a wonderful agency that is clearly bringing a lot of value, in my opinion, to the DTC space. Taylor does updates and kind of like pulse of what he's seeing on his end. Obviously, he only has a sliver of the pie, but he's a great follow. So both these guys are great follows on Twitter if you're not following. Now, AI is such a buzzword now, and I think operators can get overwhelmed with like, oh, let's just do AI. Let's do AI. I've seen AI implemented in ways that I don't think are optimal. How should operators be thinking about AI and how they should integrate it into their e-commerce store?
Well, the best use case for AI right now is to look at the processes that you do in your business, that operators do every single day, particularly starting to look at the ones that they might be thinking of handing off to VAs or just alternative forms of labor. Those tasks are usually very well suited to like an AI. And like, let me define what I think of as AI right now, because you're right, it is a buzzword. AI in the sense is like an LLM. That's what people are really referring to right now. Obviously, it has broader use cases than that, but that's kind of what I'm referring to, which is essentially a system that has an understanding of human speech and human text, and has a worldview that's good enough now to develop a little bit of intuition. So I would start by analyzing what those processes are, and then I would figure out how can I first make myself more efficient and my team more efficient. So what are the tools that I have available? And then once I've really nailed down how that fits into my process and my business, how can I try fully automate that process? So that's the way that I approach these problems right now. And I think it's the best way in the current state of the technology.
Okay, so I'll give you an example of what I do that takes me, I don't know, 10 minutes once a week. So it's one of these things where I haven't wanted to figure out how to automate it because it's just such a menial task. But it's basically I'll load up a Shopify report, search for the numbers, grab the numbers, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and then pull up my review report on Judge Me, look at the reviews, and then put those in there. And it's just like copy and pasting from multiple different channels or data sources, and then putting them all in a single spreadsheet. Is that something I should automate that I could automate? I would imagine this is probably even like more basic than like AI stuff.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. So, yesterday, at the time of recording, we released a podcast yesterday, where we spoke about what we're actually building a CTC, which is called an ultimate brief, which is very similar to what you're describing in that we process your reviews, we process your sales data, and we help that you get a more holistic picture of your business. So I can talk through like the exact way that I would automate that and that I have, and that why AI is well suited. So the first thing I would do is I'm not 100% sure if Judge Me has an API. I know that Shopify does. And it would be pretty trivial for someone who knows what they're doing to pull in that data automatically into any way you want. So you can pull it into the Google Sheet if you want that to be your interface. And then also the reviews as well, you can pull that in. And then what I would do is I would figure out what the insight you're trying to get from that data is. So like what you're trying to figure out and what those action items are. And the first thing I would do is explain that to an LLM, to the AI. So you say, this is the data, you're providing it the data that you've pulled in, and you're explaining what your thought process is. And then you say, okay, now summarize that for me, or provide insights for me, or only inform me if there's something that I need to worry about or be aware of. And then like it is actually possible to take that a further step and take the action items themselves based on the information that you're providing. But yeah, I like that could be an entirely automated process that sends an email to you once a week if that's what you if that's the preferred way you wanted to look at it. Or it could just pull it in automatically for you.
Yeah, I found that the reason I kind of do it is like if it once it gets automated, I stop looking at it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I don't know if that's like a common thing where you just automate everything. It's like when's the last time I looked at paying my water bill?
Yeah,
Years
yeah,
ago. So
yeah.
one of my fears is that by automating some of these things, that I kind of lose a little bit of a pulse on the business.
That's fair. And it's a genuine worry and concern that I think people have around AI. It's like if you use it too much as a crutch, does it get to a point where you actually lose the core skills and that intuition that you need to operate your business? I mean, I think it's very dependent on the person. You could start off by semi-automating the process of just pulling in the data, and then you could have like a text box on the side, which gives you an AI-based summary, so you're forcing yourself to still look at it. It just kind of depends. But my personal perspective is that eventually we'll get to a point where like it doesn't actually matter too much whether or not you stop looking at it, because the AI is going to be able to take the actions that you require when it needs to. So that's where I think it's going anyway.
I had a conversation with my buddy talking about AI, and what he kind of mentioned is that with ironically or unironically, as AI adoption becomes more commonplace, more people are creating like AI blog posts and stuff like that. So the sources of novel information to LLMs is going to essentially be other AIs. And like that will be the end of like LLM learning, right? As they just
Hmm.
regurgitate the stuff they've created out of computational power or wherever it comes from.
Yeah.
Do you see that happening, or how do we, it kind of goes back to that core skill. Like, how do we maintain that core skill of humanity creating? And maybe this is probably a bigger question for the podcast, but I think it's an interesting perspective of where we're going.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're describing, I read a research paper which showed this, where they try to train an LLM or an AI model based on its own outputs, and then see how many iterations of that it would take for it to kind of, for the whole process to fall down. And it was like 10, after like 10 iterations or 7 iterations or something, it was just spitting out absolute nonsense and absolute garbage. And again, now like 80% of the code on the internet is AI written. So much of the text online is becoming AI written. So there's real concern that you're going to run out of training data to develop these new models. And these new models are ultimately going to reach a point where they can't progress any further. Like there's only so much information in the internet. So right now, like this, they're trying to scrape YouTube and videos to give it a bit more juice. But there's a lot of very, very smart people figuring out different techniques to improving these models beyond just the training data. Because right now it's just been, let's get as much training data as we can and spend as much money as we can on computation and just see what it produces. But that's a very real possibility. And I think that it's going to have societal implications where if it's become a crutch and then there's this assumption that it's going to improve too much and then it doesn't, what does that mean for the world? I mean, beyond that, I'm still optimistic that there's still a significant amount of progress to go on the actual application layer. So what we're discussing is like the foundation model. So like GPT-3 versus GPT-4 versus GPT-5. I think we can get very, very, very far with the current model that we have, just applied to different applications. And the reason why I believe that is because most of the investment has gone into coding, and I've seen firsthand how great coding has become and how powerful it is. And that's going to happen to every single business vertical, and that's going to create a lot of efficiency.
So that's something interesting that I've been thinking about internally is, so first things first, I'm a complete idiot when it comes to coding. Like, you tell me, a software engineer is going to have that API stuff. Understand, like, that's kind of Greek to me. Like, I understand what an API is and being able to tie in, but I wouldn't even know where to begin. Like, is this, what language do we start with? Like, do you work in, is it Python? Is it, like a SQL database that you set up? I don't even, I guess you could ask AI all that stuff and it would direct you. But, one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, I would love to roll out like a new outreach program, let's say. And of course there's CRMs out there, out the wazoo. But they all kind of like do like 90% of what you want to do. And you just trade off that 5%. So the thought process is like, well, could we build our own CRM using AI to really do the things that we needed it to do? Would it be able to like ping those, like, can we scrape Instagram accounts to see what they're posting and see if they tag us? Or is that against like Facebook's, terms of use? Or could you use an API call for that as well? Like,
so there's definitely ways around it. And I guess the overall point is that it is empowering people to build their own software. And that's rapidly improving. So like right now, could you build whatever you wanted? Like, I think the answer is yes. Like, even if you're not technical, if you spent a little bit of time setting up the best technologies, it would be frustrating for you in the beginning. Like, it would be difficult. It wouldn't be perfect, but could you build it? Could you put it out? Like, yeah, you could. And that's just going to keep improving. So there's this whole theory on like the failure of enterprise SaaS. Like, what happens when Eric can build his own CRM like in a day and get it to do exactly what he wants, and he has this personal assistant to make adjustments and make modifications. He doesn't need to make a support ticket anymore. So like that's I think that's coming. The company Replit actually released something pretty recently, like an agent.
How do you spell that?
That just Replit, Replit. Okay. So they released something pretty recently, which was it's an agent that just goes through and does multiple steps for you, and people are finding that super impressive. So like the next, so you were speaking about different programming languages like Python, JavaScript, SQL. The next iteration is English. Like, natural language is going to be the programming language of the future. I think that's pretty certain at this point.
Yeah. So if you have pretty good communication skills, you're going to be set for the future. If you don't, then maybe you should have read some more books as a child. And welcome to AI overlords. So let's continue back to AI operators. You've been generating images, so you're doing it through APIs. What is Midjourney an open API or not?
Midjourney is not. Midjourney, it was for a long time only accessible through Discord, and they just released a web app. So that is an option. The one that I use, so the underlying model that I've been playing around with a lot, is called Flux, Flux. So that's like a different thing to the Midjourney model. And you're able to fine tune your own models doing that. So I primarily use Replicate, which is an interface where you can interact with GPUs and fine tune your own models. But yeah, that's how I do it. I do it through the API, and then I can make predictions, and a prediction in this case is generate images using that same API.
Do you feel like there is a quality difference between Flux and Midjourney, or is
Yeah,
the
so
API calls trade-off worth it?
yeah, I mean, Midjourney is amazing for just generating an image, like just based off the text that you provided. So if you want to produce an image, which is like a random guy sitting in an armchair, underneath a tree in a lake, like that's what Midjourney I would use Midjourney for. I would go there straight away every time. But to actually produce images with something specific within it that exists in the real world, so like a product, or a person, you basically have to train your own custom model. It's like a little version of the big model, which you train just for yourself, and you can't do that with Midjourney. So that's why I use Flux.
Okay, so here's an application that I would think about. As a brand, I have a very specific customer base I'm going after. I no longer want to, work with modeling agencies and find the right talent and
Hmm.
go through all
Hmm.
that hassle. So I want to get a AI model.
Hmm.
I will go to would I go to Midjourney first and like give the prompts to kind of really nail down the model I'm looking for?
Yep.
And then from there I can take that model to, Flux and replicate, you said?
Yeah, well, you can interact with Flux anywhere. I just personally use Replicate as the platform.
Okay. And then with that single image, I could create, potentially an endless supply of images of that same individual in like different poses. Is that?
Yeah, that workflow is possible. I would probably start with Flux here because you're generating more from Flux. So I think it's more likely that you'll get better versions of a Flux model from like another Flux model. But yeah, there are it's called like face to many. That's the type of model where you can take an individual face. Like let's just say you got a perfect one. You got the perfect model that you want. You can use a face to many model and produce multiple variations of that person in different poses. And now it's not going to get it perfectly right,
Right.
but they'll look similar enough to the person. And then you go and you train your own model based on that training data of the face. And now you have an endless supply of images of that person. And then you train another model on your product, and you mix them together. And now you have an endless supply of that person with your product. And it's kind of feels a little bit like magic.
How do you like? I've noticed just from using the pre-made tools on the internet that I grab a product here. Ours is beauty products with a lot of text on it, and the
Hmm.
text is just like really hard,
Hmm.
especially like at this kind of detail. Um,
Hmm.
if it was like a single logo or something like that, maybe that'd be one thing. But
Hmm.
are you seeing better implementation of something like our product being able to be used in that scenario?
Yeah, yeah. So you're right. Your product is definitely a harder one to get right because of the text. So what you do though is if you take enough images from enough angles and enough lighting of the product, so enough variety, and a lot of different photos, like snap it and make sure it's high quality, and then train a model. It's kind of cutting edge at this point, so you don't know with 100% certainty what you're going to get. But I would say that it's pretty likely you would get a good representation of your product. The only caveat is as you get more specific with the product, the less creativity the model provides you in like the background and everything else in the image. So with a very simple product like a t-shirt, well, you can put that t-shirt anywhere on anyone, but when you need to get super specific, the model like it's kind of like hyper focused on your product, and so it's difficult to get the rest right.
Yeah, so I mean, it goes back to like I have a like the human model with their
Hmm.
hand holding their hand up in a position with the product, and then like dropping that product in there.
Hmm.
And our products are 3D as well. So like, does it
Hmm.
understand three dimensions and if like it's slightly turned left or right?
Yeah, yeah, it does. As long as you take as long so this is a good piece of advice for everyone who ever tries this. The training data is by far the most important thing in this process. So if you want to be able to take a photo of it from a specific angle, then make sure you've given the model a photo of it from that specific angle, and ideally multiple, and also make sure it's in high definition. If you do a low definition picture, the AI at this point is just going to think the thing is inherently low definition, and it's going to give you something that doesn't look great.
Do you foresee AI being able to work with like 3D files in the future, like STLs, I guess, or I don't know what the file type is, where they could just effectively see it in 3D?
Yeah, I've seen improvements with that, where it's able to generate 3D like representations of an object based on 2D. I think it's still very early. It's kind of like where AI image generation was like 2 or 3 years ago. But it's coming. And there's also the ability to produce I saw a recent product that came out from Y Combinator where you're able to take two-dimensional images of houses, and based off of that, it's able to create three-dimensional walkthroughs, which was super cool. So it's coming. It's coming for sure, but that's still very early and wouldn't be usable yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking more from a 3-dimensional file,
Hmm.
onto
Oh,
a 2D pose. So the other thing I saw in your feed is the use of like motion and
hmm.
using AI to create motion or video, if you want to call it that. I don't know if I would call it. I guess it's technically video, but it's more of just like kind of moving scenes. How are people doing that now?
So you can get more and less advanced with like the video stuff. If you want to get more reliable, then try and minimize the movement of the main subject within the image. So that's what you're describing kind of with just like motion in a video. But you can get them to do things and get them to walk. It just becomes expensive to do that because it requires a lot of trial and error. But most of there's text to video models and there's image to video. So what you can do is you can give it a reference image and you can say that's going to be the beginning or the end of my video. And for that, the majority I do is Runway ML. That's probably the best video generation model right now. I mean, everyone's kind of like anxiously waiting for OpenAI to release theirs. I think it was called Sora. They like released a demo of it and
Teaser.
then never
Yeah.
publicly, yeah, which is kind of what they always do now. But yeah, Runway ML is amazing. There are some open source models. I'm forgetting what they're called right now, just to get like more simple motion. But that's how I mostly do it.
In regards to going back to the LLMs, the big ones that I'm aware of, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok on Twitter or X,
Hmm. Hmm.
Llama.
Hmm.
Are those going to be the primary ones people should look at? Or do you, as of mid-September, do you have any recommendations for which is going to be your best bet?
Honestly, those are the best ones in my opinion. I mostly just use Claude 3.5, which is an Anthropic product. I find them to be the best right now, but ultimately what I'm hoping for is OpenAI to come out with a new foundational model and just kind of shake things up a little bit because it has felt like they are stagnating. And so like I'm hoping that OpenAI comes out with one and it's great, and then Anthropic comes out with another one and that competition carries on. There's a bunch of other ones right now, but at this point, they're all very, very similar. The overall like foundational model system is becoming very commoditized. And what I actually anticipate happening is that companies start investing in uh, hyper specific models that are like very heavily trained on a specific vertical or niche. And that's how they differentiate themselves. Because at this point, I don't see the money to be made when it's like incredibly cheap to use them, incredibly expensive to train them, and they're all very, very similar. Um, but yeah, right now, that's what I would do.
So let's talk about the cost a little bit. You alluded that, creating a video of someone walking is very expensive. Is that expensive more in your time going through the various prompts and getting it to work? Or is it expensive from like an API calls? It's just, credit, and going through that.
I mean, it's both. So video is the most expensive right now. It kind of goes like text, image, video as you'd expect. Because Runway charges, like Runway specifically, they have a cost, and they use a credit system. So it's like X number of dollars per credits, and if you run out, you just keep using it. Their unlimited plan is not terrible. It's like $100 a month or something. It's not like the cheapest thing in the world, but it's not prohibitive. Um, but yeah, it becomes expensive in terms of time as well. So it does take time mastering those prompts. The way to think of it is like text, text to text is kind of easy because it's a text medium that's going in and a text medium that's coming out. So those are the dimensions you need to worry about. Text to image is a little bit more complicated because now you're describing something a lot more complicated. Like there's the saying, an image is worth 1,000 words. So it's like you need a lot more to describe it. And then text to video, well, that's like how many images all put together. It just becomes more expensive, more difficult to get it right. So you have to kind of develop a sense of the wording that was used to train these models. And when you start getting more advanced, you need to understand the photography language, and the cinematic language and everything like that. But that's kind of why it's more difficult and more expensive to use those more advanced things.
How would you recommend a user accelerate their learning curve for figuring out how the prompts are? Do you have any good resources or channels that you follow, or is it just roll up your sleeves and figure it out yourself?
The best thing to do is roll up your sleeves and figure it out yourself. Like that's ultimately the best way to learn because it's like the AIs kind of have a personality at this point. And you're not going to learn everything there is about a person by reading about them. Like eventually you kind of have to meet them and talk to them and get a sense of who they are. That's kind of how I think of the AIs at this point. It's like you have to understand what makes them tick, how to make them do what you want them to, what you want you to do, how to make them do that consistently. But most of these sources will have guides. So Runway has a guide, Midjourney has a guide. I'm sure OpenAI, I know Anthropic has a guide, or like different prompting guides and prompting engineering guides that you can read and review and understand best practices. And it's best to go to the source because they're the ones that understand the text that went into producing these things. So they have the best guidance on the text that you need to use to get the best result.
Let's say you're a grumpy old dude like me and you're just giving up on learning and you just
Mhm.
want to hire someone.
Mhm.
How do you find the right type of talent who's going to thrive in the world of AI, implementing AI and utilizing it, or building out things for your company through AI?
I wouldn't sure that they have a traditional engineering background. Ultimately, like it is still an engineering product, and so having that intuition allows you to work the best with it. Someone who is able to dedicate a lot of time to something and a lot of energy to figuring things out is very important. And I mean, ideally, you would get someone with a traditional machine learning background because they truly understand the infrastructure and the architecture the best, and they'll be able to do the most advanced techniques for you. So there are some pretty advanced techniques like fine tuning, and RAG. So RAG is retrieval augmented generation. That means that you are for each prompt, you're selectively pulling in the correct context from like a database and giving that to the LLM so it gives you the optimal response. Fine tuning is actually changing the underlying model itself. And that's like a process that you need to run. So that stuff requires an understanding of the underlying architecture. So I would get an engineer. I would make sure that they don't have to be like older because the technology is super young, but just make sure they're curious and also heavily adaptable because the technology is changing every single day. And you really need to be on it. Like I'm on it every single day, seeing what the most recent updates are and seeing how I can apply that. So that kind of natural curiosity is very important too.
When you say on it, where are you getting your insights from? Just from being on the platforms and seeing it happen, or are there accounts that you follow or news outlets that you follow that give updates on everything?
Honestly, Twitter's the best platform right now, I think, X to get these updates. I don't like follow particular AI accounts that I can think of right now, but in general, like I feel like if an update is pushed out, it's going to come out to Twitter first. Like if Sam Altman tomorrow released a change to OpenAI to ChatGPT, release GPT-5, it would probably be launched on Twitter first, which is kind of cool. I mean, same with Elon being on there, they're investing a lot of time. So I spent time kind of scrolling through there and seeing what the updates are. You can get like academic about it and really read the research papers which are coming out. And that's a bit far at this point because so much is coming out and so much is experimental. But it also is where the edge is. Like when Flux was first released, there were no SaaS products around it. It was kind of just this open source model. And the people who adopted it first were the ones to get the best benefit from it. So that's like important. But yeah, Twitter's the place to go for AI, I think.
Okay. And these software engineers, the ones you're talking about with machine learning experience, are we talking like $200,000 salaries, or it seems like those people are in super high demand that it would be tough for most e-commerce operators to pay that kind of salary for someone?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if someone like in like realistically, if someone wants to figure out how AI can fit into their business, they should reach out to me and I'll be able to help them out. And but I'm sure there's going to be more people like me out there. I think these integration businesses will pop up, and you won't necessarily need a full-time employee to do it. And there'll be teams of people who are implementing and integrating these.
So in theory, you should be able to develop, like a application or a tool for them at a far more economical rate than traditionally that is done. I think about Shopify and what it did for e-commerce providers, where it used to cost $40,000 to build an e-commerce store. They drove that down to $30.
Yeah.
And the type of opportunity that came from that, obviously not everyone who had a Shopify store found success. I think the same is going to be true with AI. AI is going to be this incredible unlock that allows people to create in ways that weren't possible in the past. So
Yeah.
how do you help someone kind of like, you talk about curiosity, but I think there needs to be like a framework shift in your mindset, or how you see what can be potential or not potential. How do you help people internalize the way they should think about AI and the opportunities in the future, or to kind of be aware of the opportunities in the future?
Yeah, you should start thinking of your business as different systems and different processes that exist within your business, and kind of switch your mindset into not thinking of like, don't think of creating an ad as one thing. Like I just create an ad. Break it down into the core steps that go into that, and have that perspective and that foundation in your mind, because that's how you build an engineering product, and that's how AI is going to fit in. So that's an important thing to have, and then being able to communicate to someone who understands AI, and how they're going to integrate into your business will be very important, because you can say, yeah, I've got this multi-step process. These are the inputs and these are the outputs. So for example, like we can break it down a little bit. If you're creating an ad, what's the first input might be like an ideation. So that comes from your reviews, that comes from your brand guidelines, and that comes from who you are. Then maybe that goes into it. So that's like step one. That's the input that goes into it, creating a brief. So creating a brief is now this function that you have within your business. What that output is the brief, and then that goes to a designer. And then the designer comes up with the ad, and then you have these different inputs that go into creating the ad, and then it like comes out, and there's an iteration process, and it repeats. But now you've broken down creating like a single advertisement into this multi-step process of different functions with inputs and outputs. And that's how an engineer would come in and say, okay, I'm going to start with this. I'm going to define the inputs. I'm going to replace the brief creation process with an AI process. And then I'm going to figure out how I map those same outputs into the next step. And they're just going to carry on that way. Ultimately, though, I would also try and ensure that the people have a background in your business and have a sense of what's going on. Because if you have engineers coming in with no idea what e-commerce is and no idea how e-commerce operators work, there's a chance they'll over-optimize your business and you'll lose a little bit of the magic and you'll lose a bit of what makes you different. So that's important too. But the combination of those two things produces the best results. Like someone who knows what they're talking about and knows what they're doing, plus someone technical can really create something special for you.
What did I forget to ask?
Let me give direct guidance or steps that someone could take right now to figuring out how AI fits into their business. Like I'll give actionable steps. So the first thing you have to do is you have to know what AI is. To know how someone is going to integrate AI into a business, like someone like me, you have to know what AI is and you have to know what it works. So go to Midjourney, make an account. It's like $10 a month, and try generate 20 images. Go sign up for Claude. Every single question or every single thing that you would have Googled in your business, now ask Claude how to do that. Or get Perplexity, which is a search engine, and just completely replace Google with Perplexity. Next steps I would do, take an image that you did from a photo shoot, one of your favorite images, go to Runway, just pay like $10 for some credits, and try and create a couple of videos. See where the videos go right, see where they go wrong, see what works. At the bottom, they'll have like some guidance for different video generation techniques, like slow motion and portals and stuff like that. Play around with those, see how they work. And then the next data analysis task that you are going to do. So next time you're going to analyze anything in a spreadsheet, if you know how to code anything in a little bit of Python, go to ChatGPT, open the code interpreter, paste in your information, and ask it to run that task. So if you do that, you'll have a pretty holistic image of what the current tools are out there, and you'll have a sense of what it can do. And those will probably spark some ideas in your mind and how someone can actually integrate that specifically into your business and how your business works.
Sweet, man. Where can people follow you on Twitter?
DTC Jacob is my account on Twitter. I
All
post
one word?
some, yep, DTC Jacob, all one word. I post some cool AI stuff on there, hopefully.
Yeah, give them a follow. I have enjoyed this thoroughly. Always get my gears turning when I think about AI and how we might be able to implement it in our business. Hope you guys on the other end of the internet enjoyed it as much as I did. Cheers, and keep on growing.